to fix something up here.
Okay.
Something's not working for me. How do I do that? Don't know what I've done.
What's wrong? I mean, I can hear you and see you.
Yeah, I just don't have I got the speakers external rather than internal. Unlike on this.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Use
the external one too.
Where is that? I don't know. It's hiding from me. Chat screen react more. What does more say? That must be it there, I'd say. How's that?
Well, that doesn't make any difference to me.
Well, it makes a difference to me. That's all that matters.
As long as it's for you, you were doing
all better.
Well done, is it?
Yeah. So how are you? Doing okay?
Yeah. Yes, I am. I'm as well as I was last week, and yeah. Just at this time of the day, I get a bit tired, but
yeah.
But you know, I guess that's part of who I am at this day and age.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. You managed to work, you know, from waking early in the morning, and what time do you get home? But
about between 5:30 and 6. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have what, half an hour drive, or?
It depends on the traffic a bit, but yeah, generally about half an hour.
Yeah.
But that's all good.
Very much in life, a career life.
Yeah, still on the hamster wheel a bit, but yeah, not too bad.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
So what's new in your life?
Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. I've just sort of been, well, not much at all really. I've just been doing a lot of reading and Bible study every day, and pretty boring really.
But it can't be boring if you do it every day.
Well, that's true. That's
your
true.
Studies.
Boring to the observer, maybe, but not to me. Yeah, I've been thoroughly enjoying it, to be honest with you. I've just been really enjoying it. I haven't done that sort of thing for such a long time.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Still Corinthians?
No, I finished Corinthians, doing Timothy now.
I can't remember. What on earth was Timothy about?
He talks a bit about the apocalypse, but not in the context of how we understand the word. Apocalypse in the sense of, you know, what has just happened.
What has just happened?
Yeah, well, in the sense of, you know, like with the crucifixion and the resurrection.
Oh, okay.
So that apparently is what the meaning of apocalypse meant back then, in the context of like this thing has just happened, this apocalypse.
Yeah.
And so talks a lot about that, reminding people about what that means, and sort of like a consider response type letter. Consider this, what are you going to do? Consider this, what are you going to do? Consider this, what are you going to do?
Oh, okay.
Is
it written in the form of a letter to?
Yeah, it's a letter. Yeah, letter to Ephesus, I think. Mm.
Mm.
Mm. Sort of fascinating in a lot of ways, isn't it? You know, because I mean, you look at the letters that Paul wrote, most of which were written when he was in prison, but anyway.
Yeah.
But when you look at the letters that he wrote and compare that to, like, you know, like the ancient literature, you know, like the Iliad and, you know, Homer and all those sorts of people,
Mm.
quite profound, isn't it? How these letters have influenced so many lives over history compared to, you know, great literature.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the great literature was written, you know, in complete comfort, you know, because it was sponsored by emperors and stuff like that. And you know, he wrote these letters in prison, predominantly.
That's John you're talking about.
No, Paul.
I mean, sorry, I meant Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting mixed up with my children's names. Yeah. But I really can't recall much about Timothy. I don't remember, you know, when I did my studies on the Bible, I can't remember touching on Timothy. Where, you know, what's a little bit of his life story? I mean,
Well, I've only just started, so I can't tell you.
Okay.
I'm still getting my head around it. Okay. And it's sort of interesting how Paul, I suppose it sort of highlights the fabric of the community at the time, doesn't it? You know, like it was, you know, the Romans occupying, you know, the country, highly influenced by, you know, the Greek scholars and philosophers, and with the Jews there as well, you know. So it's really, really diverse, you know, cultures and ways of living and clashes of philosophy, you know, in terms of how those three major groups operated within their own cultures and how they engaged others. And then you've got this newfound church, and they didn't even call them Christians, I don't think, in those days. This newfound church, of which the membership comprises all of those people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what a melting pot. You know, if we think we've got it complex these days, must have been quite bizarre. And the hierarchical nature, like with slaves being at the bottom and female slaves being at the very bottom, and the role of women in marriage, and so many different aspects and dimensions at play, you know. So
what in your opinion was the reason that location was chosen for Christ to be born into?
yeah, no, that's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, my speculation or my imagination is that it must be something to do with, you know, just how that time and place would play out in history, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think, I suppose there's just so many other places, but probably the most hostile place, okay, for somebody to be born in that is not part of one of the tribes. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so many patterns and analogies too, you know, right back to the, you know, the early books, you know, where I think we talked about it briefly once before, like, the way that trees are used, in so many aspects and analogies, the fact that, the tree of life and the tree of, knowledge, and every altar was symbolized as a tree. The cross itself, hung on the cross, which is a tree, so, and then all of the analogies about being the seed, and its proximity to water, and all of those stories about, the parting of the waters and walking on the water, and, there's so many common themes over the Old and the New Testament, which is a lot of those really early stories seem to be almost like prophecies of what was to come.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As you probably can imagine, I look at 2,000 years ago and the environment, and I look at the environment and what Moya Chulubi is doing now. It's like it's almost, in fact, I'm sure it is actually a preparation for his next incarnation, I guess. I'm not sure. He says that his work at the moment is virtually all on the inner, and that he's sort of breaking down, or not breaking down, maybe building up, as all the old doctrines and religions and things that people are following, and when the time is right, those things will move down into this dimension. And he's, it's I would almost expect a leader to be charismatic and out there and gathering the flocks together, and but I get that comes from what's been happening in the last hundreds of years with Christianity. That's what they've been doing, and so I guess it's hard to be that savior who's going to give the world a new direction.
Even if you bring it down to the personal level, though, like, and just ask yourself, like, what's your deepest desire? I mean, I don't mean like the surface stuff in terms of, good food, a comfortable living, good health, that sort of stuff. I mean, your really deepest desire, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, for me, it has to be your relationship, with the divine, doesn't it? I mean, that's, it's that eternally unanswered question, isn't it? So
it's an interesting point you bring up, because framed like that, it sort of does imply something that I tend not to agree with, because I don't consciously think of that as my most important.
No, and maybe that's just illustrating the point.
Yeah.
Lots of people don't consciously think about it.
Yeah.
But if you do, and pose the question yourself, so what is my deepest desire? Or even if you just say, what do I really want? And you could pose that question as someone who's, got a great family, secure job, happily married, whatever. And invariably in my experience, invariably they'll still say that there must be something more.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. If we had to go back on our conversations over all the years that we've been having them, there's something different this year, and that I'm sort of puzzled to an answer or go along with you, because basically we were saying that years ago, but something is different. I mean, other than, as you say, the physical, just ignoring the illnesses, and all that, and jobs and the careers and things. It's just ignoring that. There is something different, I think. For example, Wednesdays just seem to come so quickly. Okay. You know what I mean? For me, because I'm at home all the time, and they just. But didn't I speak to him yesterday? That just and yeah, and so the same goes with my daily life. It's somehow it's just
accelerating, isn't it? Yeah.
That's it. Definitely accelerating. There's no doubt about that. And my daughter Lara, my oldest daughter, during this past week, asked me, I forget how she phrased it, but do you find that they're like missing links in your daily life or something like that? I said she didn't use that phrase, but I agreed with her. It's almost like the gaps, not gaps as in. I can't think of the words that. I think missing. I suppose I use the old analogy that we use all the time. You drive from A to B and you wonder how you got to B. And that is probably the closest analogy that you can do, but in your daily life, not driving anywhere or.
Isn't it funny? Because I mean, every now and again, and it seems like a silly thing to even articulate, but every now and again I sort of get this sort of glimpse of a thought. Like you sort of blink and you think, oh, is it a bit like a science fiction movie, like where you blink and basically everything just freezes and you don't know how long it's been frozen for.
That's it. That's far better analogy. Yeah.
And then when the blink is complete, you just pick up where you left off. And
it happened in that time. Maybe that was like, how long was that? Was it an hour? Was it?
Was it years? Was it? Yeah, exactly right.
Yes. Have you experienced that recently?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. That's it in a nutshell. I'd be sitting in my desk here, and I'd be looking at the parrots or the bandicoots, and then I'd suddenly come to my senses, and I thought, I look at the time and seem to have gone, but something has happened because I was somewhere else in that process. I wasn't looking at parrots and bandicoots.
No, time just stopped, and
that's right. Yeah. So I guess, does one go into some sort of timeless zone, to another dimension where there isn't time, and so everything happens spontaneously in those and so are the dimensions perhaps overlapping now, and so. Because my daughter mentioned it, okay. And
well, that's in effect the teaching of the good news, isn't it? That the earthly and heavenly realms now overlap as a result of the resurrection.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
And so the invitation is that there's this new oneness, so that as you look at your life, there's the things that you can see and touch and feel and all the rest of it. But there's also these realms that you can't see and touch, but you can certainly experience them.
All right.
Maybe not with your earthly senses, but as you develop those other senses, you know, you can certainly experience them.
Yeah. Can you actually use the word experience them? Because I guess, you know, yeah, I don't know.
Or maybe it's just imagination. My hope and wishes is that it's not my imagination.
I think it is, because, you know, imagination is a conscious thing. I think you want to imagine something, and you might even have a stimulus, something to use.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, so my own experience is like, you know, there's things that I've prayed for, and the prayer could even be as general as just guide me or give me guidance, you know. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, yep, prayer's been answered. Huh? Not how maybe I envisaged, but certainly without a doubt, you know, something has unfolded, you know.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And maybe that's in the modern term, maybe that's just the quantum field at work. I don't know, but hey, you know, something. There's this level of knowing that I have, that I just have this confidence, absolute confidence, you know, that yeah, there's intervention on my behalf.
Yeah, that I can absolutely go along with. Intervention unknowingly on your behalf, not because you asked for it. Okay. I really I don't go along for myself in 2023 for sort of asking or for prayer.
And so why is that? Because isn't that what the kingdom of God is really about? Is asking. Isn't that what it's about?
No, not for me.
So what is it? Just a passive sitting waiting?
No, for me, it's I don't know, an awareness that every single aspect that we've been talking about now is just one aspect. Okay, it's just one thing. So you can't be, because you're in the third dimension, you are separate from it away, but that's only a temporary sort of 100 years. But in actual fact, during that time, you just are not aware of it. And so awareness just every now and again hits you, okay?
But if you use that analogy of like the third dimension, but then isn't the fourth, fifth, sixth, however many dimensions still there?
Yeah, they're all there. We, through our karmic, I think, consequences, have to get consciously cut off from where our soul is trying to communicate with God. And I think that for me is yeah, it's a knowing that that is totally unconscious. And yes, whether there are, 66 planes, or whether there's only one, doesn't bother me in any way. It doesn't occupy any of my thinking or patterns. Okay, and I find that when I do practice, which is becoming less and less and less, I must say to you, my contemplation and
is it less or just different?
Sorry?
Is it less or is it just different?
It could be both. Yeah, I seem to, I don't know, just be more into. There seems to be more happening when I'm asleep, okay, in my bed, than when I sit in a chair and contemplate, or I using my pineal gland and my third eye to do spiritual traveling. Okay. Yeah. The one thing that still has an effect on me, I think I've mentioned this a few times historically, and that is the chant, the Hu, H-U chant. There seems to be something there that I don't know, rattles my cage, okay, and perhaps opens my cage door, my prison door, and then during that time, I sort of I get out of myself. I get a feeling of well, I'm actually free. You know what I mean? It's not that I'm anywhere like spiritual traveling or something. It's just that I does it make sense? I sort of feel, I think, like if we're talking about, maybe it's a heavenly dimension or something that's sort of an aspect of one sort of is now in communication or in touching, or you're now physically living in a new vibration for those split seconds, and that is conscious. You do a chant consciously, and you sit down and you do that, and you might well ask me, why do I do it?
But I think maybe what the chant does is it takes you into a timelessness as well, doesn't it? It may seemingly, in one sense, only be for like seconds or split seconds, but within those seconds, it's almost an eternity, isn't it? So
yeah, I think that's a good way of expressing it. Takes you to a timelessness, and then of course our intellect says, well, there's different dimensions. That perhaps your pineal gland has the power to do that, because of the link that it has with non-physical aspects. But talking about the pineal gland, I haven't thought about it for a long time, but maybe the pineal gland is getting affected in 2023, and as one becomes more aware of it, or one does, maybe in your case you talk about prayer and I talk about chanting, maybe that just makes that more awareness of
well, the other way to look at it too is if that gland is like a de facto aerial or receptor, maybe it's receiving a different frequency in 2023. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely something like that that's happening now. Okay, as we talk in this year, and And something just struck me at this moment now.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, maybe it's the workings on, let's just call it the inner planes, okay, for the sake of talking about a dimension number, that is putting pressure on a very positive influence, that's putting pressure on our consumeristic, satanic control that is controlling our existence in this lifetime. And so we're sensing a break free. And maybe if everybody is being influenced by it, maybe that's how the change is going to come to the world. And how people react to that, I guess, could be different. Okay.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, how Biden would react to it, or anyone.
Well, one of the things I used to muse about, particularly when I was younger, is like if you tried to transplant yourself, like 2,000 years ago, when Christ was walking the earth, and I used to sort of ponder, it's like, well, how would I know if it was him? Like how would I know?
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes then when I'm walking down the street or in a shopping centre or whatever, well, happened there on Tuesday, I was can't remember where I was. Anyway, I was somewhere, and this I was in a waiting room. It was at the doctor surgery, I think it was. Yeah, I went to the doctor here, and this guy walked into the surgery, and I'm guessing, but he looked as if he was like maybe in his 70s, something like that.
Yeah.
Unshaven and not wearing any shoes. And I immediately looked at him, and my first reaction was just like, what the hell are you doing coming to a doctor without shoes on? And then my second thought was, gee, I wonder, if he was Christ,
Yeah.
It's just like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's just so interesting how you can sort of judge something, but then a little bit like that book that I read a while back, which, I think the title was something along the lines of, but I just might be wrong. So.
Yes. But you pull yourself up, you think, who am I to judge?
Yeah.
What did Christ teach us? One of the things was not to judge.
Yeah, and it is very much a mindset thing. I mean, I can remember years ago when I had to catch a train into the city, and I'd sit there on the train and I'd just look at everyone on the train who were all just had their faces glued to their phones, and I'd sort of found myself just sort of being really sort of critical. And then I challenged myself and I said, well, no, just look at each person individually and just be curious, like, gee, I wonder what it'd be like to be friends with that person. Okay. I wonder what stories they'd have to tell. And just ask yourself those sort of questions, which is a completely different mindset from look at all these losers,
Yeah.
Yeah, most peculiar.
Yeah. Interesting, though.
It must have been a very revolutionary time in a lot of ways, because, like as I said, now you think about, like slaves and different cultures and different nationalities and stuff like that. And for Christ to go into that environment and basically, in a non-violent way, challenge the very core of that existence. Saying to the wealthy, like, what are you doing eating at that table. Like, you've got plenty of food at home and that. Why are you sitting there? Why aren't the slaves sitting there eating? Because they actually need it. You don't. I mean, you can see why, you know, the immediate reaction of, you know, the Pharisees and so on was like, well, this guy's got to go.
yeah.
We've got to kill him. Got to get rid of him.
Yeah. But you know, we talk about our society, the plague is consumerism. Back in the Roman times, you know, the way they used to just for pleasure, you know, fight each other and
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely. Yeah, no, there was
uncultured. Okay, and that's what I think us came to teach was, you know, let's put the foundations down for some sort of culture.
Yeah.
And
I think too, you know, like, and not just because it's the right thing to do, but, you know, like, if, you know, with the Spirit being given to us as an indwelling in each of us, you know, like, all of a sudden the body becomes a temple. Like, you know, you can't do this and have your body as a temple for the occupation of divinity. It just doesn't work that way, you know. Like,
yeah. You know, another person who totally non-violent that changed a large section of the world was Gandhi. You know, he didn't try and provoke violence. He could have easily, okay.
Yeah.
But
in fact, a big part of his challenge was to make sure that violence wasn't the response.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And he was successful, you know, in his endeavors, and it took a lifetime.
End his life.
Yeah. So interesting. We look at, you know, Christ and we look at Gandhi. Yeah.
Would you put Mandela into that sort of category in any way, or?
Yes. Oh, yes, I would. Definitely. You know, when you think of Paul being in prison, so on, you think of Mandela, 27 years in prison. Okay. And he was communicating with his people in those 27 years. Okay. And then he came out and he demonstrated what he had been trying to teach them when he was in prison. And he was successful. Okay. He really was amazing. He sort of, let's say, changed the Roman Empire from a violent one to an accommodating one, and and he had, you know, systems in place where people could that had really turned against one another, or white against black, and he gave them the opportunity to basically apologize, and for the blacks to accept that apology, and whites to give that apology if they could. Okay, and that it was an incredibly emotional number of years while that was taking place.
Which, you know, sort of ironically is what a big part of 1 Corinthians was about, is to stop the division. You know, all of this sort of, you know, rich versus poor, you know, slave versus free, you know, this nationality versus that nationality, this culture versus that culture. It's just stop the division.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
The other perspective too that I sort of reflect on sometimes, and it reminded me because I saw a picture again this morning, is that photograph from one of the Voyager spacecraft looking back at Earth, you know, like 2 billion miles away or something, and it's just this tiny little blue dot,
Yeah.
You know, in hanging there like a dust mite, you know, in a sunbeam. And you know, and the way Carl Sagan couched it when he saw the photograph, he said, you know, he said all of human history is on that little blue dot. You know, all of the victories, the sadness, the tragedies, the happiness, the joy, it's all there. Nowhere else, just there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, hanging in this vastness of space. You know. And then I sort of think in that context, well, you think of you know the absolute enormity of the cosmos, you know, and sometimes I ask myself, like, well, why would God even care about this tiny little dot? You know, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, why would he even care about it? You know, so, but he does.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, I see God as, you know, we talk about all intelligence and all knowledge, and I forgot what the third one is, but and you know, that means that in actual fact he isn't any sort of entity, okay, at all. And so he is everywhere, and so is that what is now, you know, because Moya makes it clear that the Godhead, there's no stagnation, there's just constantly expanding and growing. Okay? And so is that influencing us in 2023? You know, is basically that sort of expansion that you know, when the Webb telescope looks out at those vast distances and looks back at the Earth and so on, and they find in, you know, black holes, and they find other black holes that are not taking in anything but experiencing. I don't know if you saw the picture of an exploding exoplanet, where its days had come to an end, so it expands enormously. Okay, you know, anything between 10 and 100 times its size before it explodes, and that's going on all the time. So, you know, the God energy is behind all of that. Okay? You know, the existence of Earth is just an absolute flash in time. Okay, and the same thing will happen to Earth. Okay, you know, maybe in a couple of million years or maybe less, but so and we are part of that energy, and we're locked away from it at the moment, where we are. Okay, and it's almost like we've been manipulated by some alien intelligence, and certain aspects of our abilities have been cut off altogether, you know, almost like an alien experiment. I use the word alien just to separate the...
And that's sort of some of the quandary, isn't it? You know, because I mean, like the scripture tells us, you know, that we're higher than angels.
Yeah.
You know, you think, well, sure as hell doesn't feel like it. So.
Yeah. But no, you're right, it does. But we've fallen, okay? We're not, I think probably the right word is potentially, okay? Or we were, and we no longer.
There's some big questions there, isn't it? You know, like, and like just even those fundamental questions. You know, I sort of couched it originally in the context of, you know, what's your deepest desire? But even if you just sort of ask yourself in a more practical way, like, You know, it's like, well, how do I cultivate this relationship with my Creator, with God? How do I cultivate that relationship? How do I fall more deeply in love with Him? How do I understand what His desire is for me and align my desire with His? You know, they're huge questions. You know, so
yeah, they are. But as I've answered you earlier, I don't have those questions like I used to have. And
you got all the answers now, have you?
I don't know. Maybe I've had all the shit knocked out of me. I don't know. But yeah, you know, what I do look at, you know, is you know, I know something positive came out of the outcome of me having a stroke. Okay,
Yeah.
and you know, and so that's all I know. Okay, and I sort of sense some of it. Okay, from time to time, as we mentioned earlier in this conversation. So it's something that is happening. I think, you know, I can only talk for myself. It's happening to me, and you know, I'm not asking for it. I'm not searching for it. I'm not laying down, you know, some sort of path to some imaginary God or whatever. Okay. I'm just aware that today is really a good day and things are happening, and I'm experiencing funny things like stopping time and so on. I experience things in my dream that, you know, I don't actually remember largely, but I'm aware. Okay, so there's an awareness, and I woke up that something, I don't know, something quite motivational, because I wake up these days very, very different to what I used to wake up all those years ago. You know, wake up now wanting to get up and get on with life, and I'm aware of something that happened in my sleep. No, not aware of, but something. I don't know what it was. Okay, like I'm sitting at my desk and I have this time lapse. You know, I have no idea what it was. So now, you know, remember these words when I die of a stroke tomorrow. You know.
Right. Okay.
Anyway.
About to disappear down the plug hole. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be so blessed.
Yeah. Well, that's the
Yeah.
it's the march of time, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
It's a funny thing called time that bonds us to this dimension.
Yeah, it's quite quite bizarre in many respects, you know, because as you say, it's, you know, you sort of, as you said, you know, didn't I just talk to him just the other day, and like, oh, it's been a week, and I'm like that sometimes too, like from a work perspective. Oh well, that weekend's over, and then all of a sudden I say, oh, but a couple more days and it'll be next weekend. It's like talk about wishing your life away. But, yeah.
But it just is, you know, and it's not like, you know, we finish a conversation in a few minutes, and then we think, okay, now, you know, there's 7 more days, and but no, there isn't. There was only that one day. It seems like, you know, you know.
Yeah.
Sure, it was yesterday.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's an aging thing too, where time seemingly speeds up. Because when you're young, like, time can seem like an eternity, can't it? You know, it's like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
what do you mean I've got to wait?
So maybe just by getting closer to the end of a cycle and approaching death, maybe time does speed up. But what is it that speeds up? Okay, I don't know what it is, and because of the age, you know, what is it in us that speeds up?
Well, it's that analogy of going down the plug hole, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's leave it at a good place, I think.
I think so, yes. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Okay, well, it's good to see you looking so well and vital.
Yeah, and I'm feeling that too. So anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. No worries. Okay then. Take care.
Okay. Cheers, Don.
See you.
Bye.
Bye now.